where do you put your money? Do you put your money strictly in physical assets, the stock market? Like where do you like let's say you have 100 grand right now, Gareth. Where are you gonna split it up to?
So for me, I'm keeping it relatively short term unless it's in the metals, right? So I
Mhm.
have gold holdings, I have silver holdings, I have the miners right now. Those are some of the investments that I have currently. So I think those are the places to be. I think eventually Bitcoin is, but not until we get regulatory clarity there and kind of a final flush out on the crypto space. Other than that, I would just play it shorter term with defensive plays. Like one of the favorite trades for me right now is Amgen, AMGN.
Mhm.
This one has sold off as the markets have rallied off of these lows. You can actually mark the top on Amgen with the market bottoming. And so it's almost like an inverse play to the markets. Pays a good dividend. You have a lot of these positive things. So I think you start to shift again from the technology stocks that have been so hot lately to more of the
Interesting.
defensive names. And again, those should be the leaders for the next 3 to 6 months.
Theoretically, let's say the system they can't save it. Housing market blows up, bond market's already going crazy, stock market, let's say, collapses, and the US is just there losing their USD is collapsing as well. What do they do? Pull out a central bank digital currency?
Yeah.
Where do they go to cryptos? What happens to the US when the time comes for a collapse?
Yeah, so I think they're going to try to introduce a central bank digital currency, right? But the question is, how is that much different when they can still print it at whim, right? If there's no
Mm,
stated run like on Bitcoin, it's still something that they can print unlimited amounts of in the future. Do they say, okay, well, for every dollar you're going to get, half of a digital currency coin that, and therefore reducing the monetary supply? I'm not sure how that's going to work, but again, it would problematically. I just have an issue with that. You can't have an entity kind of controlling the flow of money. That shouldn't be the way it is. Again, that's how inflation's that's how the greatest empires in the world have collapsed. You look at this type of thing; it's extending throughout your environment by outside of your borders. Whether it's extending yourself too far, we saw that with Napoleon. We've seen that so many other times, and it's also just unlimited printing of resources that eventually devolves into a economic collapse.
where are you at with gold right now?
Yeah, so looking at the gold chart, I still remain as a avid bull. I did say to people when we were up in this range that we had run a little too far too fast and to wait for this level here. Again, notice this beautiful trend line right here. We broke below it, retraced into it, fell down, retraced into it, hammered, finally broke out. And then when you get the breakout, there's this kind of relief of just short covering and buying that pushed it up. You never
Right.
want to buy at those highs. Generally, you'll get a better opportunity. Came right back to that trend line right there at around 1805, and that's been the buying opportunity. So I think now is the time to be in gold again. I think the next leg is going to take out this high pivot, and we will go revisit this double top around 2075 or so. I think this time, I mean, it's very normal for double tops to occur where you pull back, right? This was a major pivot high. We retested, sellers came in. It's
Right.
it's the probabilities are now shifting that on the third or the fourth hit, you likely will break to the upside. So I think at minimum by year end, we're retesting that level. And I really think that there's a good chance that we should be above that level. And then you have to start talking about charts going back to the 1970s and 1980s about the parabolic move that we saw in gold when it finally had this breakout after about
Right.
2 to 3 years of consolidation, where gold went about 9x. And again, I don't think gold's going to do that, especially with Bitcoin on the fold now.
Is it possible that gold can 5x or 6x from here, or will it just never happen?
No, I think there's definitely always a chance, right? It depends on how bad things get.
Right.
How much does the Fed eventually get pushed to come back and print? And right. So the idea here is initially in the recession period, when we hit a recession, assuming inflation's still above 2%, the Fed is going to say, okay, a minor recession. Right now, it's no recession. It's a soft landing, just like it was transitory inflation, right? So what you'll see is the goalpost moving with the Fed, and it'll be like, okay, well, now we're moving to a small recession, but don't worry, it'll be 6 months to a year. And then as it gets worse and worse, that's where you have to say, how bad does it have to get when inflation is above 2% before they come in and print anyways, right? So there's always going to be a
Mm.
breaking point. I mean, if you told me there was going to be 20% unemployment and inflation was at 3%, well, absolutely the Fed's going to print with 20% unemployment. So it's just about where the numbers are, how bad it gets before they print. But the problem is, if they start printing with 3% inflation, you're going right back to 10% inflation in no time at all. And that's the problem. I do think they hold back for at least the next 12 months. And even when we're in a recession, they are not really dropping interest rates precipitously. Maybe a tiny bit, throw the market a bone, but
Mhm.
nothing dramatic. I think that's going to be the bigger problem, is that it's going to then start to cause a breakdown in the system. We talked about the bond market already having problems. You start to see breakdowns in the financial system itself, and then things get out of control very, very quickly, especially when we've had this artificially inflated economy and monetary system now, basically going back to the 2009 lows of the last big recession.
Are you looking at copper, silver? What's your outlook on other metals?
Yeah, so silver definitely gets my interest. I think it's interesting to notice that silver is a little bit on the weaker side. So gold has had 3 up days in a row.
Hmm.
Silver is more in line with 2, which makes sense because it's also industrial. So if we head towards a recession, silver still should perform well, but you just have to be ready for more volatility based on the fact that it has that industrial component. If the economy spins into recession, there's less demand for silver from that side of the curve, right?
Right now, a lot of people are talking about the Chinese yuan and will it end the US dollar dominance, or is it all just hype? What do you think?
Yeah, I actually am in the camp that that's the goal of the Chinese. And again, there's going to be some back and forth here. There's going to be some battles. We obviously see that constantly now, whether it's balloons in the air or other things going on. But there's like, I mean, there's no doubt that the Chinese government is trying to take what they've learned from the US and then try to do it better and take that digital reserve currency that they've created, the digital yuan, and make it the reserve currency of the world. And again, what they're also trying to do, by the way, China's also trying to get their middle class to really evolve into spending money, much like the US middle class has. And that's their goal. They don't want to be reliant on other countries for, trade. And like they are at this point where, the US slaps tariffs on, or the US decides to do sanctions. They want to become independent and kind of a body where they deal with their own future. They come up with their own future. So I think that's going to be the key, but I do think that China's absolutely on that path, and I honestly expect that to be the case. It won't happen quickly.
Right.
Reserve currencies don't flip overnight, but I think over the next 10 years you probably do see that.